An officer collapsed during a chase, but his K-9 partner's heroic act left the world stunned. The sun cast a soft golden light over the streets as Officer Daniels cruised through the city in his patrol car. The day had been quiet so far, the kind of peaceful shift that officers hoped for but rarely experienced. Beside him, sitting tall and alert in the passenger seat, was his loyal K-9 partner, Rex. The German Shepherd's eyes scanned the surroundings, his ears perking at every sound, ready to respond at a moment's notice. Daniels glanced at Rex and smiled. Rex wasn't just his partner. He was his closest companion, a friend who had been by his side through countless patrols and dangerous situations. From their very first day of training, Daniels had known there was something special about Rex. He was sharp, fast, and fearless, but most importantly, he was loyal to the core. "Quiet day so far, buddy," Daniels said, giving Rex a gentle pat on the head. "Maybe we'll actually get through this shift without any trouble." But deep down, Daniels felt an odd sense of unease. For several days, he'd been feeling a dull pain in his chest. Nothing too serious, just enough to make him think twice. He chalked it up to stress and long hours on the job. Today, though, the pain felt sharper, more insistent, like a warning he couldn't quite ignore. Suddenly, Rex tensed, his ears standing straight up, and a low growl escaped his throat. Daniels instinctively reached for the radio, his pulse quickening. Moments later, the dispatcher's voice crackled through the speaker. "Attention, all units. Suspect fleeing on foot following a robbery at Market Street. Last seen heading toward Central Avenue." Daniels straightened in his seat. "Looks like our quiet day's over," he muttered, turning the wheel sharply. He glanced at Rex. "Hold on, boy. We're going in." The patrol car sped through the narrow streets, weaving between traffic with practiced precision. Rex stood at full attention, his eyes locked on the passing scenery, sensing the urgency. As they approached Central Avenue, Daniels spotted the suspect, a man in a black hoodie, sprinting down the sidewalk, glancing back over his shoulder in panic. Daniels hit the brakes and jumped out of the car. "Stop! Police!" he shouted. The suspect didn't slow down. Instead, he picked up speed, disappearing into a maze of alleyways. Daniels took off after him, his footsteps echoing against the buildings as he pursued the fleeing man. Rex followed closely, his powerful legs propelling him forward with ease, ready to assist at any moment. Daniels' breathing grew heavier with each step. The pain in his chest intensified, spreading across his ribs like a tightening vice. He clenched his teeth and pushed through it. He had to catch this guy. Every second counted. But then, everything went wrong. His vision blurred, his legs wobbled beneath him, and before he could take another step, his body gave out. Daniels collapsed onto the pavement, the world around him spinning and fading into darkness. His last glimpse before losing consciousness was Rex skidding to a stop beside him, barking frantically. Rex barked louder, nudging Daniels with his nose, trying to wake him up. When that didn't work, the dog stepped back, his eyes darting around as he processed the situation. He knew something was wrong, terribly wrong. Without hesitation, Rex turned and bolted toward the patrol car, his paws striking the ground with rapid precision. The streets blurred around him as Rex sprinted back, determined to get help. He reached the car and jumped up, pressing his paw against a button near the dashboard, a special emergency alert designed for situations just like this one. A piercing alarm sounded from the vehicle, drawing the attention of nearby officers. Passers-by began to gather, their faces filled with confusion and concern. Some reached for their phones to call for help, while others stood frozen, watching the scene unfold. Meanwhile, Rex returned to Daniel's side, his eyes never leaving his fallen partner. His bark grew more urgent, as if demanding the world to act faster. In the distance, the wail of sirens grew louder. Rex's body tensed, his eyes fixed on the flashing lights as a police car pulled up beside them. Two officers jumped out, immediately assessing the situation. "Daniels," one of them called, rushing to his side. He pressed 2 fingers to Daniel's neck, checking for a pulse. His expression grew serious. "We need an ambulance now." The second officer radioed for paramedics, his voice steady but urgent. Officer down at Central and 5th. Requesting immediate medical assistance. Rex stayed close, refusing to move an inch. His eyes were filled with anxiety, but there was also a fierce determination in his stance. He had done everything he could to help, and now he watched, waiting for someone to save his human. The sound of an ambulance filled the air as paramedics arrived on the scene. They moved quickly, assessing Daniels and preparing to transport him to the hospital. One of the paramedics noticed Rex sitting protectively at Daniels' side. He crouched down, speaking softly. "Don't worry, boy. He's in good hands. You did great." Rex's ears twitched, but he didn't take his eyes off Daniels as they lifted him onto a stretcher. His heart seemed to race with every second, every movement the medics made. Even as the ambulance doors closed, Rex's gaze never wavered. He would follow his partner anywhere. One of the officers gave Rex a reassuring pat. "Come on, Rex. You're coming with us. We'll take you to the hospital. He's gonna need you there." Without hesitation, Rex climbed into the back of the patrol car, his eyes fixed on the flashing lights of the ambulance ahead. As the car followed the ambulance toward the hospital, the streets blurred past the windows. Rex sat still, his mind focused on one thing: staying by Daniel's side no matter what. The sirens echoed through the streets, signaling urgency as the ambulance sped toward the hospital. Inside, paramedics worked swiftly, monitoring Officer Daniels' vitals and administering emergency care. His condition was critical, but there was still a chance if they made it in time. Meanwhile, Rex sat quietly in the following patrol car, his intense eyes never leaving the ambulance's flashing lights ahead. The hospital loomed in the distance, growing larger with every passing second. As soon as the ambulance pulled up to the emergency entrance, a team of doctors and nurses rushed out, ready to receive the patient. The doors burst open, and Daniels was carefully lifted out, the wheels of the stretcher clattering against the pavement. Rex jumped out of the patrol car, his claws clicking on the concrete as he hurried after the stretcher. "Whoa, easy there, buddy," one of the officers said, gently grabbing Rex's harness. "We'll let you see him, but you've got to wait for the doctors to do their thing." Rex looked up at the officer, his ears flattening slightly, but he didn't resist. His instincts told him to stay close, but he also trusted the people around him, trusted them to help his partner the way he had done everything he could in those critical moments. He sat down but didn't relax, his eyes locked on the hospital doors that had just swallowed Daniels. Minutes felt like hours. Nurses and doctors rushed in and out, their expressions grave, their voices low and serious. Rex could sense the tension in the air, the way every movement carried urgency. People stopped and whispered as they passed by the dog sitting vigilantly outside the emergency room. Word had already started spreading about the officer who had collapsed during a foot chase and the incredible actions of his K9 partner. The officer who had brought Rex sat beside him, rubbing his head softly. "He's tough, Rex. He'll pull through. And if he doesn't, well, it won't be for lack of trying, right? You were there when he needed you most." Rex responded with a soft whine, his eyes never leaving the doorway. After what felt like an eternity, the doors finally swung open, and a doctor emerged. He approached the officer, his expression serious but hopeful. "He's stable for now," the doctor said. "We managed to stabilize his heart rhythm, but it was a close call. He'll need time to recover, and we'll have to keep him under observation for a while. But your friend is strong. He has a good chance." The officer exhaled in relief, patting Rex on the back. "Hear that, Rex? He's gonna be okay." Rex stood up immediately, his tail wagging slightly, but his focus remained steady. He wanted to see Daniels, to confirm for himself that his partner was safe. "Come on," the doctor said with a smile. "Let's take him to see his handler. I think that might do them both some good." The officer nodded, and they led Rex into the recovery room. The quiet beeping of machines filled the air, and Daniels lay motionless on the bed, his face pale but peaceful. Tubes and wires were attached to him, monitoring every heartbeat, every breath. To most, it would have been a frightening sight. But to Rex, it was all that mattered. Daniels was here, alive. Rex walked to the side of the bed, placing his front paws carefully on the edge. He sniffed his partner's hand, then gently rested his head on Daniel's arm. The steady hum of the machines was the only sound in the room as the two reconnected in silence. Daniel stirred slightly, his fingers twitching ever so faintly. His eyelids fluttered open, and for a moment, his gaze was unfocused, hazy from the medication. Then his eyes locked onto Rex, and a weak smile crept onto his face. "Hey boy," Daniels croaked, his voice barely a whisper. "You stayed with me." Rex's tail thumped softly against the floor, and he nuzzled closer, his warm breath tickling Daniel's arm. It was a small moment, but in that instant, it spoke volumes, words that didn't need to be said. Gratitude, relief, love. The officer standing nearby couldn't help but smile. "That dog, he saved your life, Daniels." He knew something was wrong and got help faster than any of us could have imagined. Daniels blinked, his mind processing the words slowly. He turned his head slightly to look at Rex, his eyes glistening with emotion. "You really did it, didn't you?" he whispered. "You saved me." Rex barked softly in response, his tail wagging a little harder. Days passed, and Daniel's condition improved steadily. Nurses and doctors often stopped by the room just to catch a glimpse of Rex, the hero dog who had become a legend almost overnight. The story had spread far and wide, how a K9's quick thinking and unshakable loyalty had saved his partner's life. News outlets picked it up, and soon, the hospital was receiving calls from journalists eager to tell the story. Despite the growing attention, Rex remained by Daniel's side through it all. He would lie quietly on the floor beside the bed, his ears perking up at every sound, his eyes watching every visitor who entered the room. He was a guardian, a constant presence, and the very definition of loyalty. One afternoon, Daniels was finally strong enough to sit up and pet Rex properly. His fingers ran through the dog's thick fur, and for the first time in days he laughed. A low, raspy sound that filled the room with warmth. "You really are something else, you know that?" Daniels said. "I owe you my life." Rex licked Daniel's hand, as if to say, "No thanks necessary. Just doing my job." The day of Daniel's release from the hospital finally arrived. Though still weak, he was determined to walk out on his own 2 feet, with Rex by his side. The hospital staff had grown fond of the duo, and a small crowd of nurses and doctors gathered near the front entrance to see them off. Some clapped softly. Others simply smiled, moved by the bond between man and dog. Daniels rested a hand on Rex's head, leaning on him slightly for balance as they made their way to the patrol car waiting outside. The crisp air felt fresh against his skin, a welcome contrast to the sterile hospital room where he had spent the last week. "You ready to go home, boy?" Daniels asked, his voice steady but soft. Rex's ears perked up, and his tail wagged enthusiastically. He didn't need to be asked twice. The drive back to the precinct was quiet, peaceful even. Daniels stared out the window, reflecting on everything that had happened. The chase, the collapse, and most of all, Rex's heroic actions that had saved his life. He couldn't shake the thought of how close it had all been. Without Rex, he wouldn't be sitting here now. That fact settled in his chest like a weight, heavy with gratitude and awe. When they arrived at the station, something unexpected awaited them. The parking lot was packed with officers and reporters, cameras flashing as soon as Daniels and Rex stepped out of the car. News of Rex's bravery had spread like wildfire, and the entire department had come together to honor him. The police chief stood at the front of the crowd, holding a small medal in his hand. His face was solemn but warm as he approached Daniels and Rex. "Officer Daniels," the chief began, his voice carrying through the crowd, "you and Rex have been an inspiration to us all. What happened that day reminded us not only of the dangers we face, but also of the incredible bond between an officer and their K9 partner. Rex's quick thinking and unwavering loyalty saved your life. And today we want to recognize that." Daniels swallowed hard, feeling a lump rise in his throat. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak just yet. The chief crouched down and gently placed the medal around Rex's neck. "Rex, On behalf of the department and this city, we thank you for your service and your bravery. You are a true hero." The crowd erupted into applause. Officers cheered, some wiping away tears they didn't bother to hide. Even the most hardened members of the force couldn't help but be moved by the moment. Rex, ever calm and composed, stood proudly with the medal around his neck. His eyes scanned the crowd, alert but content. Daniels knelt beside him, wrapping an arm around his partner. "You've always been my hero," he whispered, his voice breaking just slightly. Now the rest of the world knows it too. The media swarmed closer, eager to capture every detail of the story. Reporters bombarded Daniels with questions, their microphones thrust forward. "Officer Daniels, how did it feel knowing your life was in Rex's paws that day? What went through your mind when you woke up and saw him there? Do you think Rex knew exactly what he was doing?" Daniels took a deep breath and held up a hand, signaling for silence. The crowd hushed, their cameras and recorders still rolling, waiting for his response. "Rex is more than a dog," Daniels said, his voice steady and clear. "He's my partner, my friend. And when everything went wrong that day, he did what a true partner does. He stepped up and saved me. Not because it was his job, but because that's who he is. He didn't hesitate. He didn't panic. He just did what needed to be done. That's something I'll never forget." The crowd remained quiet for a beat before breaking into applause once again. This time it felt different, deeper, more meaningful. It wasn't just admiration for the heroic act. It was an acknowledgement of the bond between man and dog, a bond forged in trust, tested in crisis, and strengthened forever. As the ceremony wound down and the crowd began to disperse, Daniels and Rex lingered for a moment, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky glowed in shades of orange and pink, casting a soft light over the city they had sworn to protect. Daniels scratched behind Rex's ears, the corners of his mouth turning up in a small smile. "Come on, buddy. Let's go home." Rex barked in agreement, his tail wagging in anticipation. Home sounded good, a place where they could finally rest, where the chaos of the last few days could fade into memory, leaving only the unshakable bond between a man and his dog. Back at home, Daniels settled into his favorite chair, leaning back with a sigh. Rex lay at his feet, his head resting on his paws, his eyes half closed but still alert. The house was quiet, save for the soft hum of the heater and the occasional creak of the floorboards. Daniels reached down, running his fingers through Rex's fur. "You know," he said, his voice thoughtful, "I've been through a lot in this job. Seen things I'll never forget. But nothing comes close to what you did for me, Rex." Rex thumped his tail in response, a soft, rhythmic beat against the floor. Daniels smiled. "You're a hero, buddy. My hero. And I'll never take that for granted." They sat in comfortable silence, the weight of the day slowly lifting. For now, there was no need for words, no need for action. Just the quiet comfort of knowing that, no matter what the future held, they'd face it together. Because that's what partners do. Days turned into weeks, and the story of Rex's heroic act continued to spread. News stations picked up the story, playing footage of the emotional reunion between Daniels and his K9 partner. People across the country were moved by the tale of loyalty and courage, sending letters and messages of support to the precinct. Daniels couldn't walk into the station without someone stopping him to ask how he was feeling, or to give Rex a treat. The dog, now a local celebrity, took it all in stride. No amount of attention or praise seemed to faze him. He remained calm and collected, always focused on his partner. One morning, Daniels sat at his desk, flipping through a stack of mail that had arrived for him. Most were letters of well wishes from strangers, but one envelope stood out. It was addressed in neat handwriting, with a return address from a local elementary school. Curious, he opened it and pulled out a bundle of colorful drawings and handwritten notes. "Thank you, Officer Daniels and Rex," one letter read in big, looping letters. "You are our heroes." Another drawing depicted Rex standing tall with a cape around his neck, like a superhero. Daniels chuckled softly, holding up the picture for Rex to see. "Looks like you've been promoted to superhero status, buddy," he said, smiling. Rex tilted his head, his eyes full of curiosity. But beneath the lightheartedness, Daniels couldn't shake the deep gratitude he felt. Every letter, every drawing was a reminder of how lucky he was to still be here, how close he had come to losing everything, and how Rex had given him a second chance. Later that day, the police chief called Daniels into his office. The chief leaned back in his chair, folding his hands thoughtfully. "Daniels," he began, "I've been thinking about everything that happened. It's clear that Rex's instincts and training saved your life, but I also believe his story can inspire a lot of people. We've received an invitation for the two of you to speak at a local community event. They want to hear your story, and more importantly, they want to meet Rex." Daniels paused, considering the idea. He wasn't one for public speaking, but if sharing their story could help others understand the incredible bond between officers and their K-9 partners, it seemed worth it. "We'll do it," he said. "Rex deserves all the recognition in the world." The day of the event arrived quickly. A large auditorium buzzed with excitement as people filled the seats, waiting to hear from the officer and his heroic dog. Children waved posters with Rex's name on them, while reporters set up cameras in the back of the room. Daniels stood backstage, adjusting his uniform and glancing at Rex. The dog sat calmly beside him, perfectly poised as always. "You ready for this, boy?" Daniels asked, though he already knew the answer. Rex responded with a confident bark. The moment they walked onto the stage, the crowd erupted into applause. Daniels nodded appreciatively, guiding Rex to the front. He took a deep breath, letting the noise settle before speaking. "Good evening," he began, his voice steady but warm. "Most of you have heard our story by now, but what you may not realize is that this story isn't just about me. It's about the incredible trust and partnership that exists between an officer and their K-9 partner. It's about the way these dogs put their lives on the line every day, just like we do." Rex didn't just act on instinct that day. He acted out of love and loyalty. Daniels paused, his eyes scanning the crowd. "I owe Rex my life, and while I'm grateful for the second chance I've been given, I also want to make sure his story serves as a reminder of the sacrifices that K-9 units make. These dogs aren't just tools or animals. They're family." The audience listened intently, some dabbing at their eyes. Daniels knelt down and placed a hand on Rex's head. "This guy right here is my hero, and if I've learned anything from him, it's that true courage comes in all shapes and sizes, even with 4 legs and a wagging tail." The crowd erupted once more, giving Rex a standing ovation. Cameras flashed as reporters captured the touching moment, and children leaned over the barriers, waving excitedly at the dog who had become their favorite local hero. After the speech, people lined up to meet Rex. Daniels watched with a mixture of pride and awe as Rex patiently greeted each person. The children, in particular, seemed drawn to him, petting him gently and giggling as he wagged his tail. One little boy stepped forward hesitantly, clutching a worn-out stuffed dog. His eyes were wide as he looked up at Daniels, then back at Rex. Can I give him this?" the boy asked, holding out the toy. "He's a hero, and heroes need gifts." Daniels smiled, touched by the gesture. "Of course, buddy. That's very kind of you." The boy placed the toy at Rex's feet, and the dog sniffed it curiously before picking it up gently in his mouth. His tail wagged as he accepted the gift, and the boy beamed with pride. As the event wound down and the crowd began to disperse, Daniels and Rex found a quiet corner to catch their breath. The evening had been overwhelming, but in the best way possible. A celebration of everything they had been through and the bond that had carried them through it. Daniels leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes for a moment. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" he said softly. Rex sat beside him, his body pressed close, offering silent reassurance. Daniels opened his eyes and smiled. "And something tells me we've got a lot more ahead of us." For now, though, they would rest. They had earned it, together as they always had been and always would be. As the days passed, life at the station slowly returned to normal, well, almost normal. Rex's newfound celebrity status meant the occasional visit from reporters or community leaders who wanted to meet the heroic K-9. Daniels couldn't help but smile every time someone asked about Rex, proud of everything his partner had done and how effortlessly Rex handled all the attention. Even with all the buzz surrounding them, Daniels knew that the core of their partnership hadn't changed. Rex was still the same loyal, hardworking dog he had always been. Always alert, always ready to protect and serve. One morning, Daniels walked into the station with a coffee in one hand and Rex's leash in the other. He was greeted by Officer Morales, who grinned as she handed him a newspaper. "Seen this yet?" she asked. Daniels glanced at the front page and shook his head in disbelief. There was a large photo of Rex, sitting proudly with his medal, and a bold headline that read, "Hero Dog Saves Officer. A bond that can't be broken. Looks like you've got a fan club now," Morales joked, giving Rex a scratch behind the ears. Daniels chuckled. Yeah, he deserves every bit of it. He's the real deal. As the morning carried on, Daniels couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. His mind wandered back to that fateful day. The chase, the collapse, the moment when everything went dark. The memory was still vivid, almost too real. He remembered how helpless he had felt, how close he had come to losing everything. But then there was Rex. Always Rex. The thought of his partner springing into action without hesitation, racing to get help, still filled Daniels with awe. The sound of footsteps brought him back to the present. Chief Reynolds appeared in the doorway, motioning for Daniels to follow him. "Got a minute?" the chief asked. "There's something you should see." Daniels nodded, curiosity piqued. Rex followed close behind as they made their way down the hallway and into a small conference room. Inside, a large television screen lit up, displaying a grainy security camera feed from the day of the incident. Daniels recognized the street immediately, the very place where he had collapsed. The footage played in silence. It showed Daniels chasing the suspect, his movements determined but strained. Then came the moment, the sudden stumble, the collapse. Daniels watched as his body hit the pavement, motionless. But what happened next was what truly took his breath away. Rex appeared on the screen, pausing briefly beside Daniels before sprinting back to the patrol car. The footage clearly captured the dog pressing the emergency alert button with his paw, triggering the call for help. Then, without missing a beat, Rex returned to Daniels, barking furiously until help arrived. The video ended, leaving the room in silence. Daniels blinked, struggling to find the right words. "I knew he saved me, but seeing it like this? It's something else entirely." The chief nodded. "It's incredible. That kind of intelligence and instinct, well, you don't see it every day. Rex is one in a million." Daniels knelt beside Rex, running his hand through the dog's fur. "You've always been a hero, buddy. Now the whole world knows it." The chief smiled. "We're putting together a formal commendation for Rex, and there's talk about submitting him for a National Canine Bravery Award. I'll keep you updated. But for now, just know how proud we all are of both of you." As the chief left the room, Daniels sat quietly with Rex for a few more moments. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a treat, holding it out for Rex, who accepted it eagerly. "You've earned every bit of this, my friend," Daniels said, his voice filled with warmth. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Rex wagged his tail, his eyes shining with the same steady confidence that had carried them through every challenge. The following weeks were a whirlwind of events. The commendation ceremony was held in front of a large audience, with officers, city officials, and members of the community gathering to honor Rex. The mayor gave a heartfelt speech, emphasizing the importance of K9 units and how Rex's story had inspired so many. But through all the fanfare, Daniels and Rex stayed grounded. For them, the job was still the same. Every shift brought new challenges, new dangers, and new moments of trust and teamwork. One evening, as they patrolled the quiet streets, Daniels glanced at Rex and smiled. "You know, after everything we've been through, it feels like nothing can stop us now." Rex responded with a soft bark, as if agreeing wholeheartedly. The city stretched out before them, bathed in the warm glow of streetlights. It was a peaceful night, the kind that reminded Daniels why he loved this job despite its risks and hardships. With Rex by his side, he felt unstoppable, ready to face whatever came their way. Together, they moved forward into the night, partners in every sense of the word. No words were needed. Their bond was unbreakable, a silent promise that they would always be there for each other, no matter what. And as they disappeared down the street, two shadows merging into one under the glow of the city lights, it was clear that their story was far from over. It had only just begun.